I used to love watermelon more when I was a little boy, but nowadays I'm like, oh, it's just so filling, just like, oh, so much food. So much food in those watermelon. Oh, hey, well, it's 5 p.m. We're live somewhere in the world. So welcome. Today we're going to be talking about epilepsy and vagus nerve stimulation. Just kind of a nice out of the back pocket kind of subject. But before we get into that, we're going to do this simultaneous squeeze. So that means we're going to take a deep breath in. We're going to hold it for 5 seconds and squeeze it. And then we're going to slowly and softly exhale out of our mouths again. Okay, ready? In 3, 2, 1, breathe in. Take a sip of air at the top. Hold and squeeze. And slowly exhale. Wonderful. Okay. That was great. That was really nice. That was a little psychedelic, actually, if I'm being honest with you. Just so you know, I did quite a bit of vagus nerve stimulation today. Earlier, though. I always tell people, don't particularly stimulate your vagus nerve a ton in the very beginning of the day, because it might make you want to take a nap. Now, it wasn't an immediate thing. I did it at about 10 a.m., 10 a.m. I stimulated my vagus nerve with ultrasound. And then I worked for 5 hours. And then I laid down and I probably slept for 3 hours. My wife's back. She took a nap and I was like, oh, I want to cuddle with her. And then I slept for 3 hours just before this video. And I was like, what, Alexa, what time is it? And she's like, oh my God, it's 4:48. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I got a live to go get to. So here we are. So that was the day. But yeah, yesterday was awesome. Great stories from yesterday. But yeah, so we could keep this pretty standard to the point. Basically, when you have epilepsy, you start having seizures. And when you have seizures, you have storms of electrical activity throughout your brain. Just like this, okay? And that's not good. Generally speaking, what you're going to want to do, and the funny thing is, today they do an implant of a vagus nerve stimulator, but in the past, they used to use external electrodes and to push them into the neck. But you know how they figured that out? Is apparently, and this makes no sense at all, was they took an electric eel, and put spikes through it, and then placed it on the neck of a person to discover that it had anti-epileptic properties, which is God knows why a thing. Pretty crazy, don't you think? So literally an electric eel is how we discovered vagus nerve stimulation. Blows my mind. So when someone is having epilepsy, stimulating the vagus nerve can calm down the whole brain. And one of the ways that they'll actually do this, it's crazy. So here's my understanding of a vagus nerve stimulator implant in a case of epilepsy. First thing they have to do is they have to put an electrode of EEG inside of your skull. So they're literally going to remove a window of your skull itself, like this, like a little toy. And then they place an electrode sheet, and then they put the skull back. No, they don't think they do it. They do it in one session. And then they measure your activity while you're having a seizure. And then they use that information to know how to tune the vagus nerve stimulator. To say, okay, you do have epilepsy. It's a frontal lobe epileptic seizure, or it's something else. It's crazy. And then they put the skull back together. And then in short order, once they've recovered within a few weeks, they do the implant. And the implant is something that just takes 45 minutes. That's it. The vagus nerve stimulator implant takes no time at all. You're in and you're out the same day. You walk into the hospital and you walk out of the hospital. That's how optimal that is. It's very simple to do. Pretty crazy. So So yeah, vagus nerve stimulation can treat epilepsy. What else? So I thought this was kind of interesting. I'm gonna move on a little bit here. Check this out in the chat, okay? So I came across a paper, and I'll put what the paper says. Effects of low intensity pulsed ultrasound stimulation on metabolic lipolysis of adipocytes. Now, if you're in the ultrasound specific group, you'll see me I will have described more about the paper, because I have access to the full paper, the full text. Now they found that a little bit of ultrasound in just 3 days caused a substantial decrease, about a 40% decrease in blood-borne triglycerides, which triglycerides in your blood, as far as I know, are really bad. Really bad. So they halved triglycerides in the blood after 3 days of lipase, which is nuts. Nuts. And then they also found that epigenetically, that the ultrasound downregulated inflammation and upregulated stem cell and monocyte production, which is what protects your cells and regrows your cells. And that was, again, from just 3 days. They found these effects. 40% reduction in triglycerides. That's most people take a drug, a statin. Don't people take hardcore ADL, like HDL, LDL, lipid, protein, triglyceride regulating heart drugs for that? Am I wrong on that? Don't people take pretty hardcore drugs for this? But you did ultrasound for 3 days and triglyceride levels dropped? This is all part of a paper I'm working on down in, when I go to my trip down in Encinitas. So I'll be presenting this information, but that's pretty wild. It also created some of the conditions of, I have the paper up here. I have the full text of it. Give me a second. I'm telling you, this is completely insane. So in terms of treating obesity and metabolic abnormalities, is that they found that lipase, low intensity pulsed ultrasound, was able to activate autophagy related genes. Autophagy related genes are things they spend tons of money on for cellular rebuilding. Autophagy is your body's process of reusing old and damaged cell parts. Cells are the building block of each tissue and organ in your body. Autophagy is insanely good for your body, and just simply doing lipase starts that process. That's nuts. So that was one really interesting paper that I found. One other paper that I thought was really interesting was this one. So they found that using ultrasound can intensify the biokinetics of enzymes in the body and also in food. So it's almost like it's almost as if I'm looking at some aspects of ultrasound on a living human body as a process of, what if you just looked at this as a food product, in a sense? I mean, that's pretty fucked up, but it's not wrong in that they use those kinds of ultrasound systems to stimulate to stimulate food. Almost all of the yogurt that you've eaten in the last 5 years has been processed with ultrasound significantly. And ultrasound just changes the enzyme so that it doesn't turn brown and doesn't taste bad. That's what the ultrasound does. It prevents oxidization. And we all know that free radicals and oxidization in your own body is a bad idea. They use ultrasound to prevent the oxidization of enzymes in your yogurt and your cheese and your, whatever kind of cool kefir you're drinking these days. But ultrasound is used widely across these fields and in a non-destructive fashion at low intensities, the same exact type of settings that you're putting it into your body. So you're having an effect there. I think that's pretty wild. I think that is pretty damn wild, actually, personally. Yeah. So what else? I had to go through a ton of these. Oh, here. Okay. This is really interesting. This is talking about candida. Okay, so there are several methods to overcome. I'm going to post that here in the chat. It's from nature.com, which is really interesting. Nature.com. There are several methods to overcome the current limitations related to immobilized enzymes, some of them being chemically binding. The use of sub and supercritical carbon dioxide for the enhancement of enzymatic activity and stability. Case of alpha amylase, which is used to break down starches into simple sugars. Multiple site mutagenesis of lipase B. candida, Antarctica. Among these methods, ultrasound as a meaning to enhance the activity of enzymes is a very, very promising technique. Improving the activity of tyrosinase, enzymatic hydrolysis of starch for better glucoamylase activity, and dual frequency ultrasound enhancing enzymolysis of potato protein are among several known examples. That's really interesting. So yeah, they're using ultrasound to process your food. And then I told stories about how they're using ultrasound to stimulate the brain. Woohoo! Yesterday. Wow. Often a low intensity, short duration ultrasonic treatment is more likely to enhance enzyme activity, while prolonged exposure may lead to loss of stability and a decrease in enzyme activity. Wow. Wow. That's crazy. All right. So anyway, I wanted to just share those things because that's one thing that I've been, oh my God, having to write about all day. Honestly, guys, I respect hardcore academics so much. They spend so much time reading science papers and then creating boring PowerPoint presentation documents to go to conferences to talk in front of, 80 folks in a stuffy resort about the research. It's boring just thinking about it. And here I had to do this for basically the entire day. I hate it. But I did find some good stuff. I definitely did find some extremely cool new papers that I hadn't seen before, because a lot of them were just posted in the last couple months. So it's been a little bit since I've gone on there. But yeah, totally crazy stuff. I'd say that the best paper will be that first one that I posted, effects of low intensity pulse ultrasound stimulation on enzymes. That paper is amazing. You have no idea how cool that paper is. Yeah. So anyway, so when it comes to treating epilepsy, we want to increase the activity of the vagus nerve, and by increasing the activity of the vagus nerve, you suddenly get this complete cessation of seizure activity in the brain. That's all you need to know, guys. So if you know somebody with epilepsy, you know somebody who has seizures, and they're probably on a lot of medication to keep those seizures at bay, tell them about vagus nerve stimulation. Be like, hey, have you heard of vagus nerve stimulation? Hopefully they have, but in the off chance that they haven't, you could save this person's life. You could literally change the person's relationship to their epilepsy completely. Because vagus nerve stimulation is currently implanted in close to, I believe, 300,000 humans right now. Vagus nerve stimulation is actually, I would say that's pretty widely used. Now, there are some 8-9 billion people, people on the planet. 8 to 9 billion. So 300,000 isn't even close to a million. But I would still say 300,000 people is like a lot. That does not match the amount of people with epilepsy. So if you know of someone who definitely needs their vagus nerve stimulated, please let them know. This is a call to action to do that. What else? Yeah. That's about all. I had a really long, boring day. I had to write this like 15-page paper for this thing I'm doing in San Diego, and oh my god. It is not fun to sit down and do like pretty hardcore research kind of stuff. I don't know if I would call it hardcore research, but having to read through like 50 different research papers all in one sitting is like, oh my god. I used to do that in 2019, like for 2 hours every single day. And that was a crazy good skill set to have. I probably should get in the habit of doing that again. But for right now, it's just fucking boring. Anyway, cool. But yeah, hey, if you're doing lipus, you're doing good stuff. You are doing good stuff. And I would say, even I have seen, I'm going to say a guy that I know, his name is Bob. He does work with epilepsy and VNS with ultrasound. And he definitely notices that there's a difference. The clients notice that there's a difference. A good difference, which is really good. That's pretty amazing. So I definitely think we're in a new age of vagus nerve stimulation at this point in time. And I think that the function that is actually happening is on the acetylcholine enzyme itself. Because the acetylcholine enzyme can respond and shift. It's one of the fastest acting enzymes in your body. And it's like that because acetylcholine is in your muscles too. So when you lift something up, you're also signaling to your muscles to produce acetylcholine. But your vagus nerve also uses the exact same neurotransmitter, acetylcholine. So your muscles and your vagus nerve function can be a good indication of each other. So if you are very physically weak and you don't exercise at all, then the likelihood is that you have potentially a weak parasympathetic peripheral nervous system. It's true. It's actually true. And on the other hand, looking at the furthest end, some of the people who have full-on heart attacks, people who die suddenly, right? Not to get into the whole vaccine thing, but, people who die suddenly. And I'm not saying anything here either way. I really am not. I'm not being sarcastic here. I just don't believe we know the full story on that stuff yet. And I actually don't think that we'll ever get the full story. So believe what you want to believe, but just try to make it non-crazy talk, right? But anyway, people who die suddenly, athletes, they typically have almost two highly developed muscles, and their heart stops. They have a form of bradycardia, which is where their heart is too downregulated and their heart stops because there's too much acetylcholine, which would only be possible with steroids. Consistent steroid usage would do that. But again, same network that makes your muscles work and your vagus nerve work is called the cholinergic network. And there's a lot of ways to influence it, but one of the best ways to influence this network is with vagus nerve stimulation, ultrasound. Definitely the best. Definitely the top way to do it. So, cool. All right, well, anyway, I want to go for a nap. I was enjoying, oh my God, you guys have no idea. So on Twitter, I was in this conversation. There was some guy who posted about when a subject in clinic has more dreamlike REM states, when your eyes are moving, rapid eye movement. So there's kind of two types of sleep: non-rapid eye movement, which is just being asleep and your eyes aren't moving, versus REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. That means you're still asleep, but you're dreaming and your eyes are moving. You can see my eyes kind of move under my eyelids like that, right? That's called rapid eye movement, REM. And this guy posted an article, and he showed that when you see an increase in REM in a subject, that also means that if you test their blood, that their inflammation levels are dropping significantly. So when you see someone having more dreams, that it's also highly correlated now because of research to a lower level of inflammation. So if you're someone who has no dreams and you don't remember your dreams at all, then it's very likely that there is a vagus nerve network issue in your body that must be looked at. Like, absolutely must be looked at. And you do not want to mess that up. You need to get help on that immediately, because that could become very life-threatening, for sure. So I said, well, I see people that do VNS have clearly improved REM-like sleep, where they're having vivid dreams. They're dreaming really deep. Their inflammation levels are dropping significantly. I've seen that with VNS, and and I said, source, I've only been running this 24,000 person group for the last 6 years, so I see this all the time. I hear the little birdies speaking to me all the time on this Facebook group. So he's like, source to back up your claim. I was like, okay. He's like, well, these sound like self-reports. People saying, how would you clinically test this? That in any other way, right? You have people, they stimulate their vagus nerve. They go to sleep. They dream or they don't dream. You go, did you have dreams? Yes. Did you not dream? No. That's a data point right there, right? And I've probably overseen like 700 something people at this point in time. It's insane. It's insane. So, yeah. So anyway, then I just went online, Googled it, and I was like, okay, here's a citation. Here's what you asked for. It was already studied back in 2002. This is like a old school thing that shows that vagus nerve stimulation absolutely interacts with REM sleep, 100%. There's absolutely a connection between the two. And he was like, oh, okay. Some like neuroscientist, so that was pretty wild. That was very interesting. So I don't like arguing with people on the internet. It is such a waste of time for the most part, but I don't know. People like drama. People definitely like the drama. So I absolutely just want to be like, I want no baby mama drama at all. I just want to get on here and do my work and go home and do all that. Yeah, I do need a nap. The funny thing was I was taking a nap for the last 3 hours because I was working on this goddamn paper, and I was like, I want to go to sleep. Oh, you saw that, Charlene? Yeah. Hey, Lori and Charlene, cool. Yeah, VNS rocks. VNS is the tits. You know, there's this guy I do watch on YouTube named David Politis, and he does something called the Can-Am Missing Persons Project, and he talks just like I'm talking. So maybe he needs an app too. He talks like, and you know, the aliens maybe. No, he doesn't say that kind of thing. He's like, you know, it's interesting. They were walking by. He's in Montana, so he doesn't have a southern accent. He kind of talks like me, but older and more gruff. He talks kind of through his hand like this, and he's like, and you know, it's really interesting. They were walking through the mountain range, and they were good explorers. But there was a body of water nearby, and then they went missing. How do you explain that? So yeah, if you don't know Can-Am Missing Person on YouTube, dude's pretty baller. I do like that. I do like that guy. David Politis. If you know Mr. Ballin on YouTube, he's the guy who tells the 20-minute story vignettes that are like, wow, that story is really well told. The guy's like an ex-Navy SEAL. He's really cool. Mr. Ballin, Ballen. And I always listen to his stories on Sunday. He has one a week, and he has an Amazon show. And for a stint back in 2020, Mr. Ballin was only telling stories from the Missing 411 documentary series and the books. So there's all like a whole 6 months of Mr. Ballin telling stories that were originally told by David Politis based on true accounts of people going missing in the forest. Like literally people walking in the national forest and then just vanishing. Have you guys heard of this kind of stuff? Look it up. I'll type it in here in the chat. Missing 411, scariest shit you'll ever read. You will not want to go hiking in the woods anytime soon if you read that. Check it out on, go over on YouTube, and there's a ton of videos on this, right? Super bizarre. Very, very bizarre. A lot of historical cases of people in the forest, in national parks, mind you, hiking, and then literally going missing. And there's no explanation for it. And these are not like inexperienced hikers. Sometimes these are people who were like the most experienced hiker you'll ever meet in your life. They go missing, and then their body is recovered like 17 miles away, and their body would have had to have hiked over the top of like the entire mountain. Impossible feats for a person to make in 2 days. But their body goes from one place to the next, and there's no trail, no explanation why, no evidence of foul play. These people just go missing in national forests. It's pretty bizarre. Oh, nice, Natalie. Yeah, good. Good morning to you too. It is kind of, I did wake up recently. Love Mr. Ballin. I know, he's great. I've been listening to him since 2020. All way back when, ever since he started his YouTube channel. And I never watched him on TikTok. I just was only a YouTuber. But yeah, Missing 411, that kind of stuff is crazy. And I wondered, okay, so let's bring this back to the vagus nerve. So Natalie, you know, you've obviously come across some of these Missing 411 stories, and other people as well. There are lots of kinds of reports of people almost being magnetically hypnotized in the woods, like children. Oh, you're in Tasmania, so it's morning for you here. Okay, wow, holy cow. Okay, awesome. Well, good morning. So legitimately good morning. And I took a 3-hour nap before this, so I was like, oh, I got to do live. But anyway, so in those Missing 411 stories, when people are walking through the woods, there are reports of people stopping on the trail, taking off their backpack with all of their support food and radio and supplies, they just take off their backpack. Then they take off their shoes and they take off their jacket, and then they walk into the woods, never to be found again and for years, right? And there are multiple reports of this type of like mind control type of stuff. And so I wonder if there is, I'm not saying paranormal, but I wonder if there might be like some ability for, because, okay, I want to pre-frame this because people are going to be like, oh my God, you're so crazy. You believe in all this weird shit. I don't believe in the weird stuff, but I am fascinated by those stories. I think anybody who's honest could look at those stories and be like, okay, there's clearly something bizarre like happening. Okay? Even I can admit that. But that process sounds like animal magnetism. Certain animals have the ability to lock eyes with you. Even humans have the ability. And perform some kind of non-verbal trance type of thing with people, right? Gandhi could do it, probably the old, Jesus, if that was a real thing, sure. Different spiritual leaders, different cult leaders especially, had this magnetic kind of look. So clearly it's possible. I've heard people write stories about how they made eye contact with Gandhi and they were immediately hooked. Gandhi in India, that Gandhi. And that there was something about his aura, right? They can't even explain it. They're just using words like aura to kind of like abstract that they were hypnotized and that they probably would have done anything he said, right? Take off your backpack, take off your shirt, take off your clothes, take off your shoes and walk into the woods, right? So could there be animals out in there, like bigger animals that we don't know of yet, or something that have that kind of human-like connective ability that we don't know about? Could the forest itself be taking people? I don't know. Could it be aliens? Probably. I don't believe in aliens, really. I don't think it's ghosts. I feel like there is a somewhat of a solid explanation for what's happening. I feel like that's got to be there, but I just don't know. But I would suspect that whatever it is, if it is that trance-like thing, that it's got to be affecting the vagus nerve. Because the vagus nerve, I think the vagus nerve can be turned against you to make you freeze. I saw this video the other day of a beautiful gecko, a chameleon-like gecko that can change its skin color versus a praying mantis. Like a praying mantis with the large hands and claws that go. So freeze response, we know that animals will freeze when they're terrified. This praying mantis wrapped around the head of a chameleon, of a beautiful like gecko-like chameleon. I don't know what the exact breed of the lizard was, but it was a lizard-like thing. And at first it was moving its head to try and attack the mantis, but as soon as the mantis just had its hands on its snout and on the back of its head, the gecko froze. It went into it was paralyzed. But not because the mantises don't have a poison. The mantis did not have a poison in it that paralyzed this gecko. So, but the gecko froze completely. The gecko went like this. And then the most crazy shit, the mantis, not to get graphic, and I'm not going to show the video, but the mantis started eating the jaw of the gecko. It took a big bite right out of it, and the mantis bit the actual gecko, and the gecko had zero response. Didn't flinch at all. It was playing dead while it was getting eaten. Now, if that were happening to you, Do you think that your brain would be so paralyzed with fear that it would let a large creature with large claws eat you when you could easily move? Probably. Because that gecko could have easily moved and gotten out of the grip. But because it was so terrified of this attack, this lunge, that it froze in fear and allowed itself to get a big, nice chunk taken out of it. It eventually then started wrestling away and, again, easily got out of the grip of the mantis. But for that 20 seconds, what the hell was happening? How is that possible? And we know that that's partially a vagal effect, is that ability for your body to like freeze momentarily or have a vasovagal response. You know, people passing out when they see blood. That's a vagus nerve effect. So, I don't know. There's something weird about it. Natalie, I see your comment here. There absolutely is something else going on out there, but I don't know what. I don't know that we're ever meant to find out for our own sanity. Yeah, I agree. In a way, I agree with you, because I don't think that we're ever going to like what we hear. Whatever the real explanation is for it, it's going to cause a lot of people to be very freaked out. Like, I think there's even kind of a veil of conspiracy even in the people who work at these national parks. A sworn secrecy pact that they must make, that nobody will speak of this phenomenon of people going missing. Did you know that in the National Park Service Registry, there's no column for how many people went missing at all? They don't take a record of how many people go missing in the national parks. Oh, but they'll track everything else about your whole life. But if you go missing, you suddenly vanish in national property, which seems to be way more common than we're told, then they have no record of it. They just don't keep a record of that. I mean, they probably do keep some note of it, but there's no FOIA'd record. You know, they've got crime statistics in every city. How many people could they know or not know are going missing? There's no such program to track any missing person reports and findings in these parks. How many people go reported missing versus how many are found? Clearly, there are more that are missing than are being found. So that's pretty weird. And they do not like these questions. I mean, not liking the question is not evidence of a conspiracy, but the amount of stories that are there are, you cannot ignore that kind of thing. Anyway, I find that to be interesting. But cool, Natalie, great. We have that one more thing in common. Mr. Ballin, big fan. Did you watch his one yesterday? That was pretty bizarre. That was pretty weird. I don't know what happened with that truck driver. Who knows? Alien contact again. I don't know. I actually do kind of think the vagus nerve might be kind of an alien thing itself, potentially. If you look at kind of where the vagus nerve goes and how it like spreads throughout our whole body, it might be kind of sort of unnatural 400 million years ago. It was unnatural at the time. When it was introduced into our body, the vagus nerve was a alien organism, and then we kind of adopted it as like a thing, because it was a symbiotic relationship between the human, really the fish at the time, and the vagus nerve, which was a proboscis tongue of a Nemertean flatworm. And I have all this stuff written down, and I have some data on this. I've found some research that does DNA and RNA analysis of the evolutionary kind of history of the vagus nerve. And I haven't published the findings just yet, but I will. Oh, don't worry, I will. All right, cool. All right. Well, we've talked about a lot of cool stuff today. I'm gonna wrap it up here on YouTube. Boom.